Now, as we have already done a slight introduction of chemistry in the last class, and we were able to differentiate between the categories, which we generally call the substances. I told you that the substances can be pure substances or they can be impure substances. And the categories which we talked about, when we talk about the substances, so we talk about the pure substances and the impure substances. Among the pure substances, we have the two categories here. We have the elements and we have the compounds. And among the impure substances, we have the mixtures only. Okay. And then after this, I talked about the species or the particles, which are the building block of the categories. So elements, particles, or the building block are basically atoms. Compounds, they are molecules, and it depends on the mixture whether it's an element mixture. If it is an element and element mixture, then the building block will be atoms only. If it is an element and compound mixture, then the building blocks can be, the particles can be atoms as well as the molecules of basically the compounds. And if it is a compound and compound mixture, then the building blocks or the particles involved in making this mixture will be the molecules of both compounds, right? So till here it's clear. Then apart from this, I also told you that the elements also have the molecules. They also form molecules. Now, what is the difference between the molecules of an element and the molecules of the compound? I completely explained it that the molecules of the element will be having all they are made up of all same type of atoms, right? Now, for example, I told you like O2, like Cl2, like N2, ozone, etc. Whereas the molecule of the compounds will be, they will be having two different, or they will be having more than two atoms combining together, chemically combining together. And that is how the compounds are also formed in the fixed ratio by mass. So the molecules of the compound, the examples of them are going to be, they have basically the different atoms forming them. So the examples are like, for example, carbon dioxide, you have HCl, you have ammonia, etc. Okay. Now, till here we have done in the last class. Now, today I'm going to start with the basic building block of all the substances, and that is basically your atoms. So, let's talk about the atomic structure today in our class. Let's talk about the first. This is the first topic which we are going to study in detail, and this is a basic understanding of our chemistry. And once we know the atomic structure, then we will be going further ahead. Okay. So this is we are going to talk now about the atomic structure. Now, when we talk about the atomic structure, we say that every atom, every substance is actually made up of an atom, as I have shown you here. So whether you have the elements, they are also made up of atom. Here also you have in the molecule of a compound, they are made up of an atom, and every substance is basically made up of an atom. So atom is a smallest part of a matter. So we say whatever the substances we have, whatever the, in terms of chemistry, we say whatever is around us, that's basically matter. So matter का जो smallest part होता है, that's said to be an atom. Okay. Now atom also has got subparticles. So it has certain subatomic particles, and those subatomic particles are basically electrons, they are your protons, and they are your neutrons. So these are subatomic particles. We cannot separate them out. They are the part of one atom only. Now, in the nucleus, we can see it here. Inside the nucleus, we can see that the subatomic particles, the protons and neutrons are present. So this is the nucleus, which is the center. This is the center. This is said to be the nucleus. This has protons and neutrons only. Whereas the electrons are outside the nucleus, they revolve around the nucleus. So these are basically electrons, and they are revolving in different shells. Okay. Now, further, this is, we have talked about these are, this is the position I have of the subparticles. So when we talk about the subparticle positions, so the proton and neutrons, they are in the nucleus, and the electrons, they are present outside the nucleus. Right now, if we look at the model of an atom, which we cannot see with our naked eyes, and definitely we cannot see the solar system as well until unless we have a very refined high magnifying telescope. So the if you zoom in anything, whether you talk about the human bodies or any substance around us, you will see the structure, which is basically an atom. And if you will zoom out, you will see that that's a solar system, and the galaxy is comprised of many solar system. So the solar system, alhamdulillah, which our creator has formed for us, is same like आपका जो my nature structure है जो कि atom का. So in the center you have the sun, and around the sun the different planets revolve around in their own imaginary pathways. When you talk about an atom, so atom also has in the center that's a nucleus, and this nucleus comprises of proton and neutron. Around the proton and neutron, which are in the nucleus, you have the electrons. They revolve around the protons and neutrons, which are present in the nucleus, in their own imaginary pathways, just like the planets that's moving around the center, which is sun. Okay, so we can compare the two structure. We can see a lot of similarities between the two structure. Now moving on to the charges of these subparticles. Okay, we have already talked about the position. Now when we talk about the charges of these particles, I don't know, something is giving me problem in my throat. I'm having a itchy throat today in morning. So when you talk about the charges of these particles, we clearly define them that the protons are said to be positively charged, right? They have a positive charge on them. The electrons, they are negative charge. Whereas the neutrons, they are neutral. That means they are neither positive nor they are negatively charged. So in the center over here, we have the positive charge here in the center, right? And outside we have the negative charge around the nucleus, because and in between you can see here the nucleus is something like this. You have a proton here, and next to it can be a neutron. Then again there can be a proton, and next to it can be a neutron. So the nucleus is a combination of a proton and neutrons. Now because they are positively charged, right? So the other proton, which is again positively charged, there can be force of repulsion between them. But because you have a neutron there and they don't have any charge, so they basically help them overcoming this repulsion. So we have a protons which are positively charged and neutrons which are neutrally charged. So that keeps them both together in the nucleus. Now we have the electrons, they are negatively charged. So definitely the electrons will be having a force of attraction. They will be having a force of attraction with the protons in the nucleus. So the electrons, they have two kind of forces they experience. The forces are, they can be force of attraction, that is between the electrons and the protons, and they can be, it's between the protons and electrons, right? And the other one is actually the force of repulsion, and that is in the same charged particles. So the electrons which are there in the same shells, okay, the electrons in same shells, or the electrons, or you can say electrons in the same orbit, one orbit can have more than it, one orbit or one shell or one imaginary pathway can have more than one electron. So if there are more than one electron, they will be experiencing the force of repulsion between them. So the electrons in the same shell or different shells, even the electrons of the different shells, they will be experiencing the force of repulsion between them. So these are basically the type of forces these particles experience. So they experience force of attraction between the different particles, subparticles, protons, and electrons, and they will be experiencing the force of repulsion between the electron in the same shell or the electrons in the different shells. I hope this is clear till here. So let's proceed further now. here they're talking about. Now, we have talked about the position of subparticles, right? We have talked about we have talked about the charges of these subparticles, okay? These subparticles. Now let's talk about, we are talking in comparison to each other. So this is the first point we talked about. This is the second point we talked about. Now we're moving on to their masses. Okay, we again are going to talk about their relative masses. Relative means comparative. So when we compare their masses, so there is a similarity and there is a variety of differences in their masses. So when we talk about the relative masses of these subparticles, then we see something like the mass of a proton, which is extremely small. Imagine if I put a small dot over here, this is an atom. Now, this is basically, this small dot will be having hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of atoms in it. Now, this particular, if it has a large number of atoms present in this dot, okay, if there are large number of atoms in this dot, right? Then imagine there will be even more large number of subparticles there. Okay, so when we assume their masses, so their masses are very, very small. Okay, but still, through some analytical tools, we got to know about their relative masses. So we say that the mass of a proton is almost the same as the mass of a neutron. But when we compared it with the mass of an electron, then we said that one proton mass was equal to approximately 1840 electrons. So it was said to be negligible. That means if we collectively look at the mass of 1840 electron, that makes the mass of one proton. So we can say the mass of one electron is actually 1 over 1840th part of the mass of a proton and electron. So here we know the relative position, the charges, and the relative masses of the subparticles. So the mass of protons and the neutron is same, right? But the mass of the electron is 1840th part of one proton, or we can say that one proton mass is equals to 1840 electrons combinedly weighed together. Okay, everything is clear? We say that the mass of an atom is approximately 99% mass of an atom is there in the nucleus, because in the nucleus we have the neutrons and we have the protons, and majorly if we count their mass as 1 AMU. AMU is what? AMU is atomic mass unit. It is a unit which is given to the subparticles. So if one proton has one atomic mass unit and there are 10 protons, so it will be multiples of 1 AMU with 10. And same goes for the neutron as well. So there is a bulk which is present in the nucleus, because in nucleus you have the protons and nucleus combinedly present there. And electrons, we already know it's an 1840th part of a proton, right? Of this much, this is a mass of one electron, right? It's an 1840th part of a proton. So imagine the total mass of whatever the electrons are there, that's considered to be negligible. That means if I have an 1840 electron, that will be equal to one proton or one neutron's mass. So that is considered to be negligible. We don't count on the mass of an electron when we talk about the mass of an atom. Is this much clear? Fine. So we generally say that 99.9% of the mass is in the center, is in the nucleus, because electrons mass is almost negligible, because that's very, very small in comparison to the mass of protons and the mass of neutrons. Okay, so here is a comparison, the table which we is a comparative table. Okay, so let's have a look at it. So we are making a comparison in the terms of charges, in the term of the relative masses, And there are some more remarks here. Let's read it out. So, first of all, we talk about the protons and they are present in the nucleus. So, the position is not mentioned here. So, I'm writing down the positions also. So, then in the nucleus, we have the protons, right? And the charge is positive 1. And the relative atomic mass, the relative mass, when you talk about the relative means comparative, it's going to be 1 AMU for 1. So, mass is the same as of hydrogen atom found in the nucleus of an atom. Here they are writing about the position. So we'll talk about this particular point in the later sessions, right? Now, when you talk about the nucleus, they're also present, neutrons, they're also present in the nucleus of an atom. And they are found in the nucleus of an atom, but they have no charge on them, neither the positive nor the negative. And they have the relative mass comparative mass, that is 1 AMU. Okay, further, we have the neutrons, and the neutrons are found around the nucleus, outside the nucleus. So they are outside the nucleus, right? And the relative charge on them is negative, and they are 1840th part of a proton. If we talk about the relative mass, so that's considered as negligible. So when we talk about the mass of an atom, we don't count them at all, because 1840 electrons will be making a mass of one proton, right? So this is comparative. Now further, we don't have to look into the name of the scientist, but it's mentioned here, John Dalton. We are not supposed to. In the CIA, we don't go for the name of the chemist. Now, further things which we need to know about an atom is that the atoms, all atom of a particular element, they are same. I told you already in the last previous class that elements which are there in the periodic table, every element have their unique atoms. Now, why they are unique, we are going to talk about further. Okay. Now, the atoms of the different elements, they have different properties in terms of mass and the chemical reactivity. So, if I talk about, I have an atom of hydrogen, and I have an atom of oxygen, and I have an atom of nitrogen. So all these atoms of hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, they have the unique property. None of them have a common property. The reason is because the atomic number and the atomic mass is different. We'll talk about the atomic number, and we'll talk about the atomic mass in the class today itself, right? So if I talk about the two atoms of hydrogen, they are said to be same. But if I talk about an atom of an hydrogen and atom of an oxygen, they are different in terms of properties, in terms of mass, in terms of how do they react with each other or any other chemical. Then next point is that the atoms are not changed by the chemical reaction, just rearrange in order or number. Now atoms, they are, if I talk about the hydrogen atom, now this remains same. But if it is going to react with an oxygen atom, that's its atomic number and mass is this. So they will be, when they will be chemically reacting together, when they'll undergo a chemical reaction, they will actually form a compound. So this compound will be having a different property than the hydrogen and the oxygen, right? So basically, when they undergo chemical reaction, then they form a new compound whose properties are different. Otherwise, the atoms, we say, they are not changed within an element, right? Is it clear? Fine. Now, this periodic table, as I told you, we have 100 of elements there, right? So all the elements are here. If we have 100 of elements, then there are 100. As many elements we have, that many atoms we have, right? So if I talk about beryllium, so there's one atom, one type of an atom which are found in beryllium. Another type of atom will be found in magnesium. Another type of atoms will be found in calcium, and so on. So all these elements, they have their own specialized atom present. Is it clear? Fine. Now,
Yes.
each atom, each element has got a specific characteristic, you can say, properties. Okay, so when you see at these element tiles, I'm talking about, when I talk about this element tile over here, this In the periodic table, every element has been given specific numbers. There are two set of numbers which are given to each element. Okay. Now look here, manganese has 55 number associated with this and 25 as well. The oxygen, as I told you, it's 16 and it has 8. Fluorine has 19 and 9. So every element has the two values associated with it. So in the periodic table, the information which they have given us related to every element is the name, is the symbol of that element, is and the two numbers there. Now let's see what are these numbers, and these numbers are very unique. All this information is unique for that element. Is it clear? So each element has got a unique information given in the periodic table in that particular element tile. So first of all, the first thing which is given to us is the name. The second thing which has been given to us, that's a symbol. So every element has got a symbol. It's a shorthand way of writing an element. So every time I need not write down the element's name. Like for example, if I have to write down the chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen, I need not write down such their names, and then I need to write down they are going to combine and form water. Now this is slightly vague way of writing it down, because here I'm not getting the ratio in which they're reacting. So we normally use the symbols for representing them, and that help us in writing the formula for a compound, and that also help us in showing the balanced way of writing that 2 moles or 2 molecules of hydrogen combined with 1 molecule of an oxygen to give you 2 molecules of water. So we basically, every element is given a symbol. The symbols are according to the name of the element. Sometime only one alphabet represented by one alphabet, or they're represented by two alphabet, like for example aluminium, or sometime the first and the third alphabet they make the element, and sometime the Latin names like ferrum, plumbum, etc., they make their symbols. So we have variety of ways to represent an element into the symbolic form. Now, this is something which we have to memorize. So, as we go ahead in the study of chemistry, we will be coming across all these elements, and slowly and gradually we'll be knowing the different symbols for different elements, right? Further moving on, now coming to the numbers which are associated with every element. So there are two numbers mentioned here. Now, first number is the smaller number, and the second number is actually a bigger value. So the smaller number is known as atomic number, right? And this atomic number is actually, you need to know it very clearly. The smaller number depicts the number of protons present in an nucleus of that atom. Okay. Now the second one, the bigger value, is actually known as atomic mass. The atomic mass is basically, it's also known as nucleon number. Nucleon number is a name, is a word coming from the nucleus. So whatever the number of particles, subparticles you have in the nucleus, it's a sum of that. So basically we can say it's a sum of the protons and neutrons present in the nucleus of the element silver. So it's 107.87. Now here they have given the value in decimal. So we'll talk about why do we have the mass in decimal, though we have a proton and neutron. So we have a specific number of protons and specific number of neutron. It's not like that we have a fraction of a proton or a fraction of a neutron. Then why do we have the value in decimal figure here, right? So we will be talking about it. We normally in O levels, we get the value in a rounded off form. That's 108 instead of having this fraction. Okay, so this will be we'll be looking at these fractions of the decimal value for the atomic masses in our later years. After O levels and A levels, we'll be looking at all the elements having these masses in their decimal form. So right now we have only the chlorine where we'll be looking at, and we will get back to the reason why they are written in fractions. So let's suppose that the atomic number and the masses are the whole numbers only. So atomic number is actually the number of proton. The atomic mass is also known as nucleon number, which is the sum of protons and neutrons. Is this much clear? Now, as we have already talked about the atoms which are of an element, So we said that certain amount of information is there. So when we talk about the certain information, so we have seen this particular slide before in the last session. It says that reading elements tile which have the element name, the symbol, the atomic number, and the atomic mass. We have gone through it. Now, coming to the next part, we need to understand that whatever the number of protons are there, okay, and that tell you which atom is it. If I say there's an element X and it has 7 protons, right? So I can easily tell that X is actually nitrogen. So the proton number is fixed for every element. If I say 6 protons, then that means I'm talking about element that's carbon. So the number of protons are fixed for each element and they help us to identify which element is it, right? So if we say that the atomic number is an identity, atomic number or the proton number, which we have seen previously in the element tile, carbon with the 6. So this is an identity which help us to identify this is element carbon. Like you have an identity, your name is an identity. So with your name, I can identify if 3 girls are standing, then this is the one whose name is so and so. So that's your identity. Similarly, the proton number, if we don't know the name of the element, but we know the proton number, we can still identify that particular element if its name is not specified. So the proton number is an identity to identify any atom and on the elements, right? So every carbon atom has 6 protons, and all the atom with the 6 protons will be said to be carbon atom. Okay, so the atomic number is an identification which tells you about any particular atom or a particular element. As I already told you that if there are 7 protons, that means it's nitrogen. If there is 1 proton, it's hydrogen. If there are 19 proton, then it is basically potassium. So this is the first identity. Now we say that the atom, another very important concept, that the atom is a neutral particle. We say that the atom is a neutral particle. It does not have any charge, though it is made up of a proton which is positively charged. Okay, there is an electron which is negatively charged, but still there is no charge on an atom. The reason is that whatever the number of electron it has, the same number of protons it will be having. So the negative charges cancel out, they cancels out the positive charges, and that is why atom is said to be the neutral particle. It doesn't have any charge. Okay, so whatever the number of protons is set as an atomic number. If we say the carbon has 6 proton, that's an atomic number. So if there are 6 protons, there will be 6 electron as well. If nitrogen has 7 atomic number, that means the 7 protons are there and 7 electrons are there. They are not telling you anything about the neutrons, but for sure they're talking about the protons and the number of electron. That is what the atomic number tells you. Okay, so in a neutral atom, there is 1 electron for every proton. So whatever the number of electrons you have, it's same as the number of protons, and that is why they are said to be neutral. Is it clear? Now, as I already told you that these subparticles, what the subparticles we're talking about as protons, right? They are positively charged, electrons, they are negatively charged, and the neutrons, they are neutral in nature. Fine. Now, they are basically going to be certain forces between them. So, the opposite forces, the opposite charge, the opposite charge particles, they're going to attract each other just like the magnet do, and the same charges they are going to repel each other. So the protons and electrons, they're opposite, so they're going to attract each other, but the like charges they're going to repel, whether it's an electrons or it's basically your protons, but they are going to repel each other, whether the electron in the same shell, the same orbit or same shell, or different shell. So but they are going to repel each other. So there's a force of attraction between the dissimilar particles and the force of repulsion between the similar particles. Okay, now further we move on that when you talk about the opposite charges attracting each other, so the electron will want to get as close to the nucleus as possible by filling up the inner electron first. Now, because there's a force of attraction, and initially we have seen that the atom has got the electrons, they're outside the nucleus and they are in the different shells. So if I have a carbon, right, and its proton number is 6 and the mass number, we'll talk about the atomic mass later, our focus is on the atomic number. So that means it has the 6 protons and it has 6 electrons, right? So 6 protons can be altogether accumulated in the nucleus, but these 6 electrons, because of the force of repulsion, in the nucleus you have protons and the neutrons, so the repulsion is not strong there because neutrons are in between the protons, so the repulsion is minimized because of certain particle present there which is also neutral in nature. So repulsion is not that strong because of the presence of neutrons there. But when you talk about the electrons, 6 electrons, so because they face lot of repulsion, so these electrons, they are put up, they revolve around the nucleus in different shells to minimize that kind of repulsion. Okay, so the electrons are in different shells. So when you talk about the different shells, you number them or you name them as KLMN, right? So the K shell can maximum hold 2 electrons, L can hold maximum 8 electron, M can hold 18 electron and so on, but because we are doing the first 20 elements electronic configuration only, so the M can hold 8 electron for the first 20. Is it clear? So though it has a capacity of holding 18 electron, but due to certain logic behind it, so we are doing the electronic. So when the electrons are split up into different shells, that is known as electron distribution or that is known as electronic configuration. Okay, so when we talk about electronic configuration, so these electrons for the first 20 elements, they are divided in this way. The first shell, which is closest to the nucleus, can hold just 2 electrons, right? The next shell, which is L, can hold 8 electrons. And further away, you have M, though its capacity is of 18, but it for the first 20 elements, it again going to hold 8 electron and the remaining will be going to the end shell. Okay, is it clear? So that is what we call the electronic configuration, where we divide the electron to minimize the repulsion between them because only electrons are in these shells. Now if I have 6 electron in the case of carbon, so according to this, when I talk about KLMN, so the K shell has a capacity of 2, so 6 minus 2 is 4. So that means my L shell will have just 4 electrons, and this is how all the 6 are basically accommodated, right? So I will be having the configuration as 2 comma 4, and its structure will be here in the nucleus. I have 6 protons, and here in the 2 shells, the first shell, which is K, will be having just 2 electrons. The next shell, which is L, will be having 4 electrons altogether. We prefer to make 2 electrons together in the pair so that it's easier for the examiner to count, right? So 2 together and 2 together makes 4 and 2 further. So this is how the electrons are arranged in the carbon atom, right? Is it clear? So the most inner orbit can hold just 2 electrons, that is your K. The second orbit can hold 8 electron, that's L, till it get full up, till it's get filled, completely filled. So once all the 8 electrons are filled, then the remaining will be going to the next, which is your KL, which is your M. Now M can hold 18 electrons, but only 8 are being considered when 8 are filled. That is just the case for the first 20 elements, and we are supposed to know the electronic configuration of first 20 elements in our O levels. So we say that the capacity of M for the first 20, in the M shell, the only 8 electrons will be filled here, and if there are more than 8, they will be going into the N shell. Is it clear? I hope till here it's clear. All right. So now this electronic configuration is very, very important for us. As I told you, in the case of carbon, we have 6. So we have 6 protons and we have 6 electrons. And according to KLMN shell, the 6 electrons are uh, first shell will be holding 2 electrons, the next shell will be holding 4 electrons. Now this electronic configuration is extremely important, and it tells us that where this carbon will be positioned in the periodic table. It suggests this electronic configuration. It tells us the position of an element in the periodic table, where it will be in the periodic table, right? So the last shell electrons are said to be valence electron. They are called valence electron. These are the last shell electron. So the number of valence electron in this case is 4. So whatever the number of valence electron, it tells us that group, that means the carbon belongs to group 4. So the number of valence electron tells you about the group. And the number of shells, how many shells are these electron in? 2. So they are K and L, so altogether 2 shells, all the 6 electrons are there. So it is going to be in period 2. So let's see the carbon. This is the first shell and this is the second shell. So my carbon will be in the second shell. This is my first group, second group, this is third group, and this is the fourth group. So carbon we can see in the fourth group, right, and in the second shell. So that is what is being supported by the electronic configuration as well. Now let's look at the nitrogen. Nitrogen has 7. Okay, that means it has 7 protons and it has 7 electrons. So if we look at the configuration KLMN, so the first shell as usual will be having 2. So how many are left? 5 are left. So 5 in. So having the 5 as a valence electron, so these are valence electrons. So that means it will be belonging to group 5. Okay. And 2 period 2. So it is going to be in the second period and fifth. So let's see, is nitrogen, this is the second period and this is the group 5. So yes, the nitrogen is placed in the second period. The period are the horizontal rows and the groups are vertical. So it's in the fifth period. Is that clear? This is not exactly how the periodic table look like, because between the group 3 and the group 2, we have a full block of elements which are known as transition metal. So this is a modified version of the periodic table. Just make you understand that how the configuration help us to position the element in the periodic table. Okay, is it clear?